I go to my grocery store, and there's a table out, help prevent suicide, children's suicide, right? So one, you're blaming the kids for being suicidal. Truth is, the reason why Colorado is probably sixth in the state, they said, right, for suicide, is because you come to Colorado, it's such a beautiful, extraordinary place. And what comes with that is extraordinary people. The only people that can survive here are the best of the best, usually, right? And this is where the X Games are. People are talented in sports, they're talented in mind. And I'm going to get into why I believe that all coincides with things. So children who kill themselves here in Colorado, they're competing with great people like that. They have nothing to look forward to. They're getting pushed under a rug. And back home, I was very capable and talented. I mean, I was in the second grade. I was beating sixth graders at dodgeball, say. I mean, I was. By the fourth grade, nobody played anymore. Everybody quit playing dodgeball because I won every game at every recess, basically. So you come to Colorado, me, who grew up in a small town in Nebraska, who was exceptional there, I'm average here. There are people 10 times better than me here. And so with other kids, this beauty attracts common people, right? And those common people are going to have children here and family here. And so those kids who aren't genetically inclined, they're having a rougher time because, well, think about going to school. I mean, how School of Mines or CSU, Boulder, schools like that, where people are wealthy and intelligent and hard to compete with, and they're honest about it. They're not cheating, unlike back home, where a lot of people just cheated and sabotaged each other to succeed. I had to put up with that too. It drives me mad. But it also, I believe, because I have a unique lung capacity. Nebraska, I had athletically induced asthma, and I come from a working class bloodline. Half of my blood is slow, hard workers, not sports, not runners, nothing like that. And so every time I would play sports, my face would get beet red. And also pneumonia and bronchitis over the years, scarring my lungs didn't help, right? But I have a huge lung capacity. And coming to Colorado, it's easy for me. I don't experience altitude sickness unless I exercise, which even then I can run farther than I ever could back home. And I would get dizzy and stuff. So I remember in high school when we would test our blood oxygen contents and stuff, that I could breathe shallower and control my heart rate and keep up with other people, right? So that was just in biology when we did that, and that's when I caught on to that. But it just occurred to me that being here too, living in the mountains or just anywhere really that has lower average oxygen, right? Higher altitudes, where these kids are being raised in this environment that they're still developing. Their lungs are shallower than other, and they have to deal with less oxygen to the brain. And I think that all kind of coincides with why suicide rate is higher in Colorado, though you would think, well, this is such a beautiful, exceptional place. Everybody should just be happy. And the Coloradans that are older Coloradans, yeah, they are. All the ones that I've met, it's the implants that are fucking nuts that come here and blame everybody for everything. And like, it's just like being back home again. And drive you nuts. Like, entering a parking lot and somebody's going a mile an hour in a oversized pickup with dual cab, and I go around them because they're going a mile an hour and they yell at me for that. Stuff like that. And it's just psychotic. Well, if you have a predisposition to that, that's selfishness, and then you can't compete in this environment, think about it. Your children are already like you, but they're underdeveloped. So they're going to look inwardly. And we're blaming children for being suicidal. We're not fixing society. We're not fixing the solution. You can't fix it. It's going to take generations, hundreds of generations. If you look at religion, for instance, religion is all based in fear. And Buddha said that. He didn't believe in a deity. There's no God in Buddha. Buddhist philosophy, at least the old, original, real stuff, before we turned him into a deity. So we took a philosopher and we turned him into a god, and we still do that today. I mean, people think I'm demonic, or people think I'm just because I'm talented in philosophy. Like, it's disgusting. They think I'm evil, or all it really was a social experiment of the religious people that you meet. They are in a psychosis. And that's why I said, like, one day, religion is going to be considered either a mental illness, or the definition is going to change back to what it originally was. And since a lot of modern society is built around all these dissections of Catholicism and Judaism, which is all just punishment-based, that gives people the entitlement to judge one another and define evil and create evil, that when your genetics are just predisposed to this, disposal. I don't know. So, that's one reason why suicide is so high in a place like this. And they never mention like what areas. Pueblo is a pretty depressing place if you've ever been to Pueblo, Colorado. Anything that's really in the plains, that's south. Below Denver, that whole area is very vacant. It's very depressing. It's like Kansas. And so, don't blame kids. Don't blame the kids because they got the balls, the guts. You know, you gotta start looking at yourselves. If you're every day forcing somebody to do something that they can't enjoy, what's their reason for living? And that's what a lot of people are doing now, especially in Colorado. It never used to be like that. Nobody gossiped. They didn't openly hate on you. People just went about and did their shit and helped each other when they needed it. That's what it was 10 years ago when I moved here. It was beautiful. It was amazing. And now, it just seems like, yeah, you're just blaming the kids for the issues that we are creating. Like, for instance, every day I drive down the same road and I get to this same red light and I'm stuck behind 4 or 5 different cars. Driving once a day is my favorite thing to do. You know, in the physical sense, other than I have a lot that I enjoy, but being stuck, then you're forced to be stuck behind these groups of people that feel entitled to it. They're like, we are part of this system, we control the system, and you go slow because we go slow. And then you want to blame kids for suicide? That's what they're going through in school. You're averaging everybody out instead of individuality. letting people be good where they want to be good, letting people make mistakes where they can learn from them instead of criminalizing them for it, and then giving them this. Then another issue too, because of that, we give them an entitlement to this judicial process that is very opinionated in some states. Like with the Floyd case of, God, it was emotionally biased in the courtroom. That's all it was. To me, that's a mistrial, because I understand, the philosophy of law. But in Alabama or Louisiana, where the fuck it was in the South, the lawyer is using an empathically biased voice, like enunciation, and just the pattern of enunciation in the case without even presenting evidence to emotionally drive the jury before the trial is even presenting evidence. They never had a philosopher or a physicist, or they never had, why do you need a physicist, or why do you need a doctor in there? Well, because George Floyd had never had any abrasions on his neck. He had abrasions elsewhere on his body. How is he suffocated? Doesn't make any sense. And yet, we are so biased to that. We just assume the cop was guilty because he was white and he must have been racist. The guy was 6.5 feet tall. Huge guy. And you got one little Asian cop, one little white guy, who have to restrain this big motherfucker and then deal with the citizens on the street yelling at them, distracting them, and the cop gets blamed. And I've already analyzed all that body footage. I know it wasn't murder. It was a fucking panic attack, and he suffocated himself because he had a panic attack, couldn't control the situation. And you can see that from looking at his hands as they curl inwardly. And then you can see the cops trying to straighten his hands out, and his hands can't be forced open. That's what a panic attack does to you. So how does it get on that? Well, it's all the civil system. I mean, that's what we're doing to people. We're blaming the children for suicide. Instead of blaming the parents, or blaming the school system, blaming the judicial system, blaming just the fact that kids can't do what they want to do, to have fun or to enjoy their youth. We're forcing them all into just a competitive system against one another, though they're supposed to work together in society and function as a society. That could be a large part of what's depressing about it. And then they have to, bullying, sure. Bullying's something. But honestly, of the nerdy kids that you protected, they end up being successful and bullying people later in life. Because that's what they do. They're successful. They're wealthy. Where do you think wealth comes from? Profit is all made by somebody else. And it doesn't matter whether or not we bully kids or, we protect the nerds and the intelligence of society, the little prospering intellects. They're still going to grow up to be more successful, to take more, and do the same fucking laden hypocrisy. It never ends, hypocrisy. So, I think that's pretty much it. Quit blaming the kids for suicide. Start looking at society itself. And start looking at your own mental illness, because, God damn, man. Einstein said insanity is repetition. Truth is, it's not repetition. It's a lack of awareness to repetition, to your failures, that we're all doing the same things over and over again, and we have no awareness. We have no self-awareness. That's insanity. And a majority of people, they're all looking for other people in this democratic process to objectify one another just because you have more people behind your numbers, to corrupt democracy, because democracy doesn't work for everything. That's the truth. It really doesn't. You don't need it for every little thing. If we did, I mean, think like this. If we were so openly minded that we held democracy to all species, even though we can't communicate with them, even though they have no, say, input and no rhetoric, no ability to deny and approve our processes. We just say we are democratic. So we go, what's the most populous species on Earth? Ants, right? Ants. So we go, and now we study ants, and we start mimicking the ants, and we are ants. We become the ant colony. Because then, and this is just another roundabout way that I come to that hive mentality conclusion in my philosophical analysis. But you either become the beehive or you become the ant colony. That's pretty much how we are. We always decay into that without self-awareness and cognition. And we would go, and though there are more ants, just because there are more ants, the ants aren't thinking, the ants aren't doing anything other than being ants. They're working on their colony, and we just mimic that. That's all we would do if we were, and that's basically what's happening now. So, and that relates to our youth too, right? So that trickles down. Kids grow up, they maintain certain prejudices, they maintain cultural history, and we keep things going that way, which is great. But also it has that negative aspect too, that we are blaming the children and looking for other people to justify ourselves. And then democracy just becomes a fucking joke. I think that's everything.